let's talk about Mayweather and Maidana, the rematch. It was a great spectacle, an entertaining fight. Um, it was actually a fight that I thought Floyd won by a wider margin than the judges gave it to him. I think the judges scored it, a couple of rounds in Floyd's favour. I had it a bit wider than that. I thought Floyd really dominated the fight from start to finish. I know Floyd came out afterwards and said he'd give himself a C minus. Personally, I'd give him an A plus. I thought it was a masterful performance of boxing. I thought he was totally dominant. And again, disagreeing with Floyd, I thought it was a vastly improved Mayweather from the first fight. There were various elements to his game that I'll come on to in a second that I thought he showed better facets of than in the first fight. And I think Maidana didn't have the same periods of dominance. Right from the beginning of the fight, Floyd was pressing the action a bit more than in the previous fight, where Maidana was sort of rushing in and Floyd was up against the ropes a lot and, having to sort of fight with his back to the ropes. In this fight, it wasn't quite like that. Floyd was meeting him in the centre of the ring. Floyd was being more aggressive. Floyd's accuracy and sort of punch success ratio is superb as always. I think he hit a 51% punch success ratio, whereas Maidana hit a 22%, I believe. So, utterly dominant in those areas. And Floyd's movement was exceptional. Maidana didn't do the best job of cutting down the ring. Floyd was able to sort of move around him very, very easily, not get pinned up against the ropes too much. There was a lot less of that than in the first fight. And for those who were questioning whether Floyd's legs have gone, I think we can safely say that they certainly haven't, because his movement was absolutely superb last night. Throughout the 12 rounds, he didn't seem tired towards the end. He looked like he could fight on for another couple of rounds afterwards. Some of the punches Floyd was landing, yes, he probably isn't the biggest puncher in the sport, but taking power aside, some of the punching punches Floyd was landing were close to perfection. The way he was making Maidana miss and coming back with counter punching, he was doing this thing of moving his head back and then coming in with a big right, and it was exceptional. There were multiple occasions where Maidana got caught clean on the chin, and that's, if Floyd's able to land on an opponent who has a chin problem like Amir Khan perhaps that frequently, you have to question, despite Mayweather's apparent lack of knockout power at the elite level, whether Khan would be able to sustain such repeated punishment. I guess that's a question for another day, and a question as to whether Khan would be as hittable as Maidana, which is a debate in its own right. As for Maidana, I was slightly disappointed with his performance. He didn't bring the intensity and the momentum that we saw in the first fight. Floyd won the first 3 rounds on my card, and I think Maidana started to come into the fight round 4. But by that point, Floyd had already asserted himself, and it was going to be a matter of catching up in later rounds, which I thought was always unlikely given the style of fighting. Maidana showed slightly improved boxing skills, which was a surprise. Whilst he got caught clean a lot in the first 3 rounds, as the fight went on, and particularly in the sort of 4th to 8th round period, Maidana started throwing what looked like an above average jab. He caught Mayweather with a few jabs. So I don't know whether that was as much that Maidana's jab was good, or just that Mayweather wasn't expecting him to throw a jab. But I was really taken aback. Maidana's jab was really decent. Maidana also showed a bit of head movement himself. So coming into the start of the fight, he took a lot of punishment, but he started to box a bit. Was avoiding a few of Floyd's shots in the middle rounds, and that was probably his best spell of the fight. He didn't have the intensity of the first fight. There wasn't the periods of sustained pressure of having Floyd up against the post, landing huge volleys of punches, and that's really what was missing. From quite early on, it did appear that the fight was going to go 12, which it did. It didn't appear that either man was going to knock the other one out. There was an incident where Maidana hit Floyd after the bell, either in the 2nd or 3rd round. It was a big right hand, and Floyd was definitely shaken up by it, but he took it well. Didn't look like he was going to go down, and obviously with it coming at the end of the round, he had a minute to recover. So Maidana probably landed the one punch of the fight that seemed to cause genuine. It seemed to hurt the opponent, so we say, but it wasn't It was always a fight that looked like it was going to go 12. Now, in terms of Mayweather, I've already talked about his accuracy and sort of the way he was able to hit Maidana repeatedly. I really think defensively, in terms of his movement, his head movement, his foot movement, it was a masterclass. I think he schooled him at times. It was a vastly improved performance, in my opinion, from the first fight. He took a lot less punishment, in my opinion, and landed more effective, cleaner shots and dominated the fight a lot more. I can see why. I had Mayweather winning the first fight comfortably, but I can see why people thought Maidana was in with a shout. In this fight, there wasn't anyone who realistically thought Maidana had won. Maidana claimed he thought he'd won himself, but it was a masterclass, in my opinion, and I think it was the best Floyd we've seen for quite some time. I think it's become clear, in my opinion, that the way to beat Floyd is not going to be this sort of aggressive fighter piling in on him. He moves too well. He's too sound defensively. A fighter like Ricky Hatton, Cotto, Maidana, they're having good spells, but they're not finding the key to beating Mayweather. And I think the type of fighter we're going to see who can cause Mayweather another level of problems could be the guys who can move just as well, who are talented boxers as Mayweather. And you'd question, with Mayweather getting older, whether somebody young at their prime with speed, someone like Amir Khan would pose such different threats to a Maidana. Potentially he's a more credible opponent at this stage. And, he's someone who could cause a few issues. Obviously, the one other thing worth mentioning is the biting incident. Watched the replays back a few times. It's hard to be clear from the replays whether there is a bite involved. Maidana's mouth and Floyd's glove were certainly in the same region. Floyd's reaction, you think, what else could it be, unless he's play acting or lying? But you can't say definitively there was a bite. I think Maidana said afterwards that Floyd's glove was in his mouth, which perhaps does suggest a rather large element of guilt. And I think, if true, it is really overstepping the mark. I think the public liked the idea of Maidana, this dirty fighter in the first fight, who was rough and ready, very rugged, no respect, putting it all on the line. And there certainly is a place for that in boxing, but I felt that this biting incident, if correct, is overstepping the mark and, goes beyond the sort of, rough and ready, rugged type fighting that we like to see. So, I didn't like to see that. I think Maidana was running out of ideas. He wasn't having the same success in the first fight, and, he's getting outclassed. In terms of where they go from here, Floyd's obviously got 2 fights left on his deal with Showtime. If he was to win both, that would take him to 49-0. You could see him going for 50. So you're looking at 2 or 3 more fights. At the minute, he's saying he's just going to take 2. I'd like to see Amir Khan. I don't see the Pacquiao fight as realistic. I think it's a waste of time talking about it. Miguel Cotto fight, there is a level of interest there, but I'd like to see a different type of opponent who causes a new threat. I think Khan versus Brook, the winner fighting Mayweather, that's a great idea in theory. In practice, I don't think it works, because Khan Brook would probably fight in the summer at Wembley, and if Khan was to win, he couldn't fight in September due to Ramadan, so Khan almost needs to fight in May. I reckon that fight could well happen, which puts the Khan Brook fight in jeopardy. I guess they could fight in September, or not September, like October, November perhaps, with the theory that Khan would still be a credible opponent for Brook even if he lost to Mayweather, because there's no shame in losing to Mayweather. So I'd like to see that. I would like to see Keith Thurman, but I do understand that he's not a huge name in the non-boxing public, so whether or not that's realistic, I don't know. But I think in terms of who is there for him to fight, Thurman, Khan Brook, Pacquiao. I don't think Thurman's a big enough name. Brook's been stabbed. Pacquiao I don't see as realistic. Cotto I'd like to see something a bit different. So I think Amir Khan's pretty credible. As for Marcus Maidana, where he goes from here, I'm sure there'll be lots of options open for him. Whether he may now take more of a gatekeeper role in the division, hard to tell. I think last night was his 5th loss. He's certainly got a huge name now and a huge following, which means he'll be able to generate income. But I believe he was paid $3 million for last night. Whether or not he's going to have the same drive and ambition to continue for what will be much lower purses in future is in question. Interesting, and yeah, I mean, it was a really good fight to watch. Probably not as exciting and edgy a seat as the first fight. I think from the early rounds I felt confident Mayweather would win, whereas there was possibly an element of doubt after the first 2 or 3 rounds last time. But a good fight nonetheless. Really impressed by Floyd. Totally disagree with him that it was a C- performance. And not as good as the first fight. I'm keen to hear people's thoughts on next opponents for both men, where they go from here, and how you think the 2 fights compared. Thanks for watching.